truth is the most convincing story that maps onto reality, and that's why the central narrative is falling apart.
Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
We must see the central narrative for the fiction that it is. We are Americans.
While elections are sometimes messy, this was a secure election.
The founders began the fight for human liberty and self-governance, and it's up to us to finish the job.
I'll tell you what, we are in a truth emergency right now.
This is the end game.
It's Friday, May 17th, 2024, the 1213th day of dystopia. I'm your moderator, Chris Paul. Let's be reasonable. A warm welcome and hello to all of you listening via a paid subscription on Substack. You can become a paid subscriber for as little as $50 a year or $5 a month, and in doing so, you will get the ad-free experience. You will be able to participate in the conversation on Substack and join the interactive live streams every Wednesday. And if you can't or you don't want to, continue listening to the podcast for free on Substack or a wide variety of podcast platforms and, of course, Rumble. All I ask is that you share it with your friends. You can find the links to the podcast, the writing, the social media, and the merch site by visiting linktree.com/I'm your moderator. Anyone who understands the roller coaster we've been on these past few years knows we haven't reached the end yet, and there may still be hard times to come. And as we add $1 trillion to the national debt every 100 days, we could be headed for some shaky financial times. If you're like me, you're figuring out how to diversify and make sure some seeds are planted for whatever may come. And that's one of the many reasons I think Bitcoin is part of our future. But it's not only about money. Bitcoin looks to be a critical part of the next generation of technology, communications, energy, verification, and even national defense. I'd encourage everyone to do their research and do it now. And if you're convinced of the likelihood that Bitcoin is an essential part of our future, then you'll need an on-ramp. I recommend River. River empowers you to grow your portfolio without any unwanted surprises and eliminates third-party custodians, putting you in control of your assets. Open an account with no minimum purchase requirement. You can get your Bitcoin journey started with just $1. Visit partner.river.com/reasonable to create your River account today. That's partner.river.com/reasonable. Now, I know that many of you out there understand the need to diversify assets, or maybe you're looking to protect your retirement savings, but you're not quite there yet on Bitcoin, and you feel better about precious metals. I get that too. I think going in multiple directions is wise, and I do that myself. And when it comes to buying precious metals, you want to be working with a good company, and that's why I've partnered with Goldco. Goldco is a 6-time Inc. 5000 winner, 2022 Company of the Year, and they've helped people like you and me place over $2 billion in gold and silver. And I have gotten silver from Goldco. And right now they're offering my supporters up to $10,000 in bonus silver while supplies last. Don't pass this offer up. Go to reasonablegold.com now. This is your opportunity to protect you and your family from an out-of-control government before it's too late. So don't wait a second longer. Take action today. Click on the link in the podcast notes or go to reasonablegold.com now and get your free gold kit, your free IRA kit. You'll be glad you did. So today we will not be going from the sublime to the ridiculous, nor will we be going from the ridiculous to the sublime. We will just be going from the ridiculous to the also ridiculous. And I will leave it up to you to decide which of these stories is the most ridiculous. I have a feeling many of you might say this one. So there was a congressional hearing yesterday where a bunch of emotionally unstable and incompetent, illegitimate members of Congress pretended to determine whether or not Merrick Garland, the fake president's appointed attorney general, would be held in contempt of Congress for failing to respond to a congressional subpoena and hand over information. Now, we've talked many times about the sham January 6th committee, that primetime television show, how they organized themselves to try to retrieve all of this information they couldn't get otherwise. They still don't have a lot of that information. We've heard stories about how they don't have access to video and documents. They're not able to hand over to these Republicans in Congress what they had in the prior Congress. We've talked about how many of these fake Trump indictments seem to be geared toward figuring out what Trump was holding on to. What is all this evidence and information Donald Trump has that we are not allowed to have? Where are the PEDs, the Presidential Emergency Action Documents? Where is the doomsday binder, that 10-inch thick binder that Trump has that they can't get access to? Where are all of the declassified Russiagate and Spygate documents? Where's all of it? Let's raid Trump. Let's sue Trump. Let's wage lawfare until we can get all of the information we need. And they have failed over and over again, and we assume that that is a Democrat problem. That's a uniparty problem. It's not Republicans versus Democrats. It's MAGA versus the uniparty. So the uniparty is trying to acquire all of that information. And to do so, sometimes they will employ members of the uniparty right in their role as controlled opposition, in their role as potential Trump and MAGA allies, to help them in their quest to gather all that information. Now, I don't know if Merrick Garland is just holding back information on behalf of the fake president or on behalf of the uniparty left, but I suspect Merrick Garland is quite limited in the amount of information he's able to access as well. Does the James Comer-led Oversight Committee think that it's going to refer their contempt of Congress charges over to Merrick Garland's office, where Merrick Garland will prosecute Merrick Garland? And I'm making light of whatever the process would be, but the idea that these Republican committees are going to actually be successful with any of this stuff is preposterous. We saw what they did when it came to impeaching the fake president's appointed fake Department of Homeland Security Secretary, Alejandro Mayorkas. They couldn't even get the Senate to hold a trial. Now, a lot of people chalk this up to the fecklessness and incompetence of the people involved in the process, the actual members of Congress. But at some point, you have to at least consider that it's due to their illegitimacy and that something else is going on in the background. Regardless, it would behoove us to stop following the way the television analyzes these events as if they are all real and legitimate and the process is playing out like the process plays out. Everyone is just going by the book. The Congress is taking its work very seriously. We have this tendency to think that because we don't know exactly what's going on and the media doesn't know exactly what's going on, then the people in Congress also don't know what's going on. And maybe some of them don't. But when the more popular Republican members of Congress get up and they talk to the TV cameras, should we be pretending that all the things that they say are serious and that they are telling us what's happening to the best of their knowledge? I don't think anyone could possibly believe that. So we have to leave that aside and immediately understand that whatever is being communicated, no matter how much or how little legitimacy is vested in these individuals as part of our government, we are not being told the whole truth at any point. And once you know that, you have to understand that something else is being prioritized over the clear and direct truth. Now, we can talk about all sorts of ways to view that positively, to understand that something else is happening behind the scenes that will eventually work toward our benefit. Totally open to that possibility. But it could be that all of these TV characters are just there to trick us. And if that makes you uncomfortable, consider it on a sliding scale from most harmful to least harmful, and understand that what is being relayed exists somewhere along that scale. Because regardless, someone is getting tricked by someone communicating falsehoods and misrepresenting what it is they know. And so with that in mind, let's take a listen to some of what happened in the very real Congress, in the House Oversight Committee yesterday. Now, they are talking about holding the Attorney General in contempt. If we were to pretend that this was a serious body doing a serious job on behalf of the American people, that would be the job they were doing. They were considering whether or not to hold the Attorney General in contempt. That should be a very serious, sober proceeding.
I'd like to know if any of the Democrats on this committee are employing Judge Merchan's daughter.
Please tell me what that has to do with Merrick Garland.
Is she a porn star?
Oh, Goldman. That's right. He's advising. Okay.
He's advising who? What? Do you know what we're here for? You know we're here about
I don't think you know what you're here for.
Well, you the one talking about.
I think your fake eyelashes are messing up.
No,
what you're
ain't
reading.
nothing.
Hold on.
Listen.
Order.
Mr. Chairman,
That's beneath
would
even
you
your
please
screen.
regain
That's beneath
order
even
of your
you.
committee?
Order.
I do have a point of order, and I would like to move to take down Ms. Green's words. That is absolutely unacceptable. How dare you attack the physical appearance of another person?
Are your feelings hurt?
Her words down. Oh, girl, baby girl.
Oh, really?
Don't even play.
Baby girl? I don't think
we are going to move, and we're going to take your words down.
I second that motion.
So who will have to fail? Okay. Ms. Green agrees to strike her words.
I believe she
Chair
needs to apologize.
recognizes
No.
Mr.
She
Perry.
needs to apologize.
Okay, hold on. Then after Mr. Perry's going to be recognized, then Ms. Green
I'm not
has 4 minutes and
apologizing.
21
Well,
seconds.
then
Okay,
you're
reserve
not
the right to
striking your
object.
words.
I am
Mr.
not
Perry.
apologizing.
Now let's go. Come on, guys.
Why don't you debate me?
Mr. Chairman, the
it's
minority.
pretty self-evident.
You're not.
Yeah, you're
out
not.
of order.
You don't have enough
You're out of order.
intelligence.
Chair recognizes Mr. Perry.
Okay, move to strike
I'd like to
I
strike
move to
those
strike the
words
lady's
as well.
words.
I move to
I would
strike
like to
order.
strike
The
as
lady's
well.
words again.
That's 2 requests to strike. That's 2 requests to strike.
Oh, they cannot take the
There's
words.
another motion to strike her words again. Please
All right.
get
Okay.
your members under
Here's
control.
the correct apology. Ms. Green, do you agree to unanimous consent to strike your word?
I repeat again for the second time. Yes, I'll strike
right.
my words,
That-
but I'm not
all right.
apologizing.
Without objection.
Not apologizing.
Chair recognizes 21 seconds.
Mr. Chair, point of order.
Who's
It's me.
Ms. Crockett?
I'm just curious, just to better understand your ruling. If someone on this committee then starts talking about somebody's bleach blonde, bad built butch body, that would not be engaging in personalities, correct?
A what now?
Chairman, I make a motion to strike those
I
words.
don't think that's
Hold on.
I'm
parliament.
trying to find clarification on what quality.
Chairman, motion to
I
strike
had no
those
idea
words.
what you just said.
We're not gonna do this. Look, you guys earlier literally just.
You
Y'all
just
did it
voted
first.
to do
Y'all did
it.
it first, so
You
you don't
just
want to talk about
voted
it.
to do
Say
it.
you're gonna get
Order.
margined.
I'm trying to get
Okay.
clarification.
Look at, calm down.
No, because this
I
is
would
what
like
y'all
to get
do.
through proceedings.
So I'm trying
Hey,
to
Ms.
get
Crockett,
clarification.
you're not
You don't wanna
recognized.
play
Ms.
games.
I can't hear you with your
And
yelling.
You don't want
Calm
me to
down.
Be,
Can
no,
you please calm
don't
down?
tell me to calm down.
Calm down.
Because y'all
Please
talk
calm
noise,
down.
and then
You're
can't
out of
take
control.
Because if I
Look,
come,
Chairman,
if I
can
come
we
and
send
talk
outside to
shit
take a
about
break
her,
for 5
y'all
minutes?
gonna have a
Mr.
problem.
Chairman, Mr.
Order.
Chairman.
All right,
Sorry.
Chair.
I don't know why you're
Order.
acting
Chair
like
now
that.
Now, naturally, you understand that I skew a little more gonzo on all this stuff to begin with, so I find all of this hilarious. It was already a reality show to me. This was already Jerry Springer, because the process is a farce to begin with. Our government is a sick joke, and it probably always has been. I'm not sure it's been this overt. Maybe we just weren't seeing it. This kind of reminds me of the videos I used to see from countries all around the world where their parliament or their Congress would begin an argument that ends in a fist fight, people throwing chairs and having to be separated. The Democrat lady who was installed in Congress, Jasmine Crockett, sounded like she was about to get up and try to fight Marjorie Taylor Greene and Anna Paulina Luna. She sounds like a person who has done that before, who has a tendency to get in arguments, get flustered, be unable to control herself, and then get violent. And then you had AOC pretending to be exactly like Jasmine Crockett, who's black, while letting, I guess, her hood flag fly. Is that how people talk where you grew up, AOC? Is that what it is? Is that just your Bronx coming out, you big-bootied Latina? Remember when these people were telling us about their institutions? I mean, this is our democracy. I mean, it's their democracy, but this is what they call our democracy. This is happening in the citadel of our democracy. You know, the citadel of our democracy that was attacked during the very violent insurrection as a bunch of MAGA grandmas wandered through the halls of the nation's capital, staying between the velvet ropes as they attempted to overthrow our government. Now, I'm not suggesting that prior to January 6th, 2021, our government was wholly legitimate, but any legitimacy it had vanished on that day. That was basically the end of the American federal government, if you could even say that it had continued up until that point. There was an insurrection against this country. It happened on November 3rd, 2020, and it is ongoing. January 6th was a staged event to make it look like MAGA would be violent. It was the American Reichstag fire. The fact that some MAGA supporters got caught up in all of that is very unfortunate. I hope the ones who have had their lives destroyed by it are properly compensated. I'm not saying you can properly compensate for that, but this right here is what we told those people were threatening. They were the danger to this. This is the thing that we are told we had to preserve. Now, if they are really pretending to try to pretend to have a government, then it's not working. This is too obviously awful for anyone to get on board with. Again, hilarious, entertaining. But as a governing body with the authority to lead a nation, no, it's not that. It's obviously not that. At some point, to continue going along with this, you are nothing but a sucker and a subject. If these people had any sort of legitimate authority to tell you how to live, you should still say no, just on principle. But it turns out they actually don't have any legitimate authority to tell you how to live. And you know who determines that? You do. Now, you can accept that authority, you can accept the responsibility, and you can begin trying to figure out how to reorder your life in that mindset while dealing with the various realities that have been imposed on you, the restrictions on how you're able to live your life and make these choices as a result of your willing complicity over years or decades. And again, no judgment. We've all been there. We're all still there. But it's a matter of how you are moving away and how quickly and for what reason. And I'm not trying to excuse Marjorie Taylor Greene for any of this. She was clearly goading them and baiting them, but nothing she said was even remotely as bad as what Jasmine Crockett said, nor as ridiculous as what AOC did. Dan Goldman does work with Judge Merchan's daughter, and before becoming a congressman, he served as counsel for the Trump-Ukraine impeachment hoax. Marjorie Taylor Greene just successfully made that fact go viral across the nation. People are seeing this video, hearing this audio over and over and over again. That fact is right at the heart of it. Matthew Colangelo, who's dealing with that Alvin Bragg case up in New York right now, is from the fake Biden administration and its fake Justice Department led by Merrick Garland. So it actually was germane to the conversation. It's entirely possible that Jasmine Crockett was unaware of that. She asked what that has to do with this hearing. Marjorie Taylor Greene then commented on her being unable, through her long fake eyelashes, to, I guess, read her own name tag there. I don't know what Marjorie Taylor Greene was doing other than making fun of her and triggering her. She is clearly easily triggered. Don't know if you caught it, by the way, but Jamie Raskin, in an attempt to make a clever anti-Trump joke, ended up asking if Judge Merchan's daughter was a porn star. So that's a big whoopsie for Friar Cuck. Now, if all of this is some exposure operation so that everybody realizes, oh, the Congress is totally illegitimate, corrupt, and incompetent too, then great. Hopefully everybody's learning something. But if this is supposed to be serious and we're supposed to support these people and quote unquote elect these people and have them represent us, then sorry, this is a joke. The entire government at that point should absolutely be immediately disbanded in whatever form it still retains. How many aspects of the government must be proven illegitimate before you accept that the federal government is illegitimate? It's not like we need a federal government, by the way. This isn't the only way that things could ever be run. We are actually allowed to participate in this process in other ways than through rigged elections. We are encouraged to believe that the vote is the most important thing. And in fact, it's the only thing by the people who control the vote. And I'm not making this up. It's not a radical idea. This is international law. It's also the Declaration of Independence. You know, that old document that Joe Biden attempts to recite at campaign events in front of all 12 degenerate communists in attendance. But let's go through a little chunk with these congressional hearings in mind. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. That is an expression of the foundational principles of this nation. That is not me being a radical conspiracy theorist. Jefferson and whatever compatriots note that it is not only our right, it is our duty. And duty to whom? Is he saying it's someone's duty to the government or to the country? No, it's your duty as a person to refuse to be ruled by the illegitimate and incompetent. It is your duty to your family and to your community to refuse to live according to the dictates of these people. What is it we are pretending to preserve? The point of this time, if there is an intentionality and plan behind it, from a political level, a government level, even a military level, the point would be to show everyone what an illegitimate government looks like and what it can do and why we need to throw it off and replace it with something else. And if there is no plan like that, if there are no secret white hats in the background, then you have to imagine that God's plan would be somewhere along those lines too. People have to start telling the truth and doing the right thing if we are to even deserve to get out of this situation. Everyone will just have to decide when that moment is. It's a lesson that many or most of us learned when they began to systematically destroy society, telling everyone they were doing it to save lives. So our Congress is showing itself to be wholly illegitimate, unable, and unworthy to make decisions for anyone else, much less declare war or spend taxpayer money. And we've been very patient with the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court has some good members. Clarence Thomas is a good Supreme Court justice. That man's a national treasure. It doesn't mean that his institution is doing okay, but at least he's good. And we have some hopes about some others. They didn't exactly knock it out of the park when they refused to make a decision on Texas versus Pennsylvania, the case that Ken Paxton filed along with 19 other attorneys general to have the elections reviewed. Could be that delegitimized all of them right there. But we like giving them the benefit of the doubt because we think that they're kind of some last resort, some backstop, some institution that might pull us back from the edge. But that happens to be exactly what the Uniparty is worried about. They've been attempting now consistently for a few years to delegitimize the Supreme Court. And I'm not just talking about putting Ketanji Brown Jackson on it. They want our Supreme Court to be the country's ultimate governing authority, the way it is in Brazil. The thing that they're aiming for, or were aiming for, in Israel, that was the justification of the color revolutions a year ago, way before Israel's 9/11 and the paragliding go-karts incident. They like to reform the high courts because we are told that the judges, they must be objective, even though they constantly tell us who appointed them. But they're supposedly the final authority on matters of fact and matters of law. And we have seen consistently how easy it is for that to be abused. If there is a solution to be found in any of this, maybe it is in the courts. The 300 federal judges that Trump appointed, the 3 Supreme Court justices Trump appointed, are they going to weigh and measure things based on the Constitution? The original Constitution in its original intent, not the post-Civil War Constitution with the Reconstruction Amendments that weren't properly ratified. Read George P. Fletcher's Our Secret Constitution, Columbia Law School professor, avowed communist, and I'm pretty sure a global Zionist. And he makes the argument that the old Constitution needed to be overthrown, and finally it was with those Reconstruction Amendments. It's not me making it up. This is a positive argument that he asserts. He believes that Abraham Lincoln was a hero because the Civil War was fought to overturn that original Constitution, go from a republic to a democracy, the focus on the sovereign individual to the nation as a whole. The focus taken from liberty to equality. That is a total inversion of the purpose of this nation as advertised. Fletcher then goes on to argue that the Reconstruction Amendments shifted the focus to the courts because now the courts had everything they needed to essentially create law and reform society toward that new vision. If they can't pass the laws, if they can't get the constitutional amendments, the courts will just simply reinterpret everything, decide things in the way they choose, and then set precedent that must be followed. This wasn't an accident. He wasn't describing how history naturally proceeded. He was saying this was intended from the very beginning. And if you study these tumultuous periods of history worldwide, you'll find out these same things were happening at the same time in other places. This is what it looks like for the regime to implement its system over time until it achieves complete and total control over everything. And naturally, it is always a total inversion within the false reality in terms of the regime goals and its communication of those goals. So it should be no surprise to anyone that we were told the Civil War freed all slaves forever, when what it actually did was bring each and every one of us under the full control of that very regime forever. But let's talk a bit more about the courts, because there is now a great and profound controversy brewing over the court's legitimacy. This is the New York Times from yesterday. At Justice Alito's house, a Stop the Steal symbol on display. After the 2020 presidential election, as some Trump supporters falsely claimed that Biden had stolen the office, Many of them displayed a startling symbol outside their homes, on their cars, and in online posts: an upside-down American flag. One of the homes flying an inverted flag during that time was the residence of Supreme Court Justice Samuel A. Alito Jr. in Alexandria, Virginia, according to photographs and interviews with neighbors. The upside-down flag was aloft on January 17th, 2021, the images showed. President Donald J. Trump's supporters, including some brandishing the same symbol, had rioted at the Capitol a little over a week before. Mr. Biden's inauguration was 3 days away. Alarmed neighbors snapped photographs, some of which were recently obtained by the New York Times. Word of the flag filtered back to the court. People who worked there said in interviews. Now, the New York Times, the old gray lady, our paper of record, the most responsible institution in our land, posted a picture of the house with the flag upside down. Now, it doesn't show an address plate. You don't know his street. There's a car in the picture, but they made sure it didn't show the license plate. But nonetheless, this is not a totally unique house, but a recognizable one. If you're familiar with Alexandria, Virginia, I imagine you could probably find it pretty easily. If this was Breitbart sharing this picture and it was Ketanji Brown Jackson's house, this would be called racist and doxing. And wait a second, we were told that there was going to be a Stop the Steal symbol at Alito's house. All they just said was a flag upside down. While the flag was up, the court was still contending with whether to hear a 2020 election case, with Justice Alito on the losing end of that decision. Now, whoa, wait a second. Are you telling me that the Supreme Court just chose not to even hear a case about stolen elections and that Alito was on the losing end of that case? Well, first of all, that makes Alito a hero. But second, I was told that these cases were all decided according to an objective consideration of the evidence. You mean the cases weren't even heard? Yeah, Kami, the cases weren't heard. Come on. Wait till you find out what the evidence actually shows. In the coming weeks, the justices will rule on two climactic cases involving the storming of the Capitol on January 6th, including whether Trump has immunity for his actions. Their decisions will shape how accountable he can be held for trying to overturn the last presidential election and his chances for re-election in the upcoming one. Wait, what? These very serious cases are going to shape his chances for re-election? That's weird. I thought the case was only about whether or not presidents have immunity for executing faithfully their official presidential duties in office. How would that affect his election chances? Oh, because if the court cases happen, he could go to jail. Is that it? People are going to find out he did all those crimes you said he did. Is that going to happen? No, that's not going to happen. By the way, leaving the principal conversation about immunity aside, I hope the court doesn't give him immunity so that we actually have to see these trials progress, so that people actually have to hear the facts of all of this. The election fraud, January 6th, all of it. In fact, I hope that these trials end up being scheduled to happen between the election and the inauguration. So sometime between November 5th of this year and January 20th of next year, when people are the most tuned in, let's have those trials. Let's have the nation discover after they vote that the 2020 elections were obviously completely and totally rigged and stolen. I know people think that Trump is in danger. Trump's not in danger. The regime is in danger. The Uniparty is in danger. This is when the knife gets twisted. You want retribution? This is part of it. I mean, look at Trump. Every day, when they film the scene of Trump telling what's going on in the courtroom, when he comes out from backstage where they say the courtroom is, he comes into that hallway or parking lot or whatever the heck it is, that part of the set of Law and Order, New York, the loudest hush money. Does he look defeated? Does he look tired? Does he look like a man who might be locked up for 700 years? No, of course not. The whole thing's a clown show. And Michael Cohen, the star witness, by the way, this week, has made the entire effort an utter embarrassment for everyone involved with it. Should the case be dismissed? Yes. Will it be? No. If it was dismissed, who would that be best for? It would actually be best for the regime, for the uniparty. It wouldn't be the best for Donald Trump. The case is already dead, and they haven't even gone on offense yet. The prosecution destroyed itself already. This is when the fun begins. Stop being upset about the injustice. Recognize that the point of all of this is that the system itself is unjust. But all that ultimately matters is the court of public opinion and people standing up. The rest of this is just an illustration of the problem to everyone who has not been paying attention. Let them learn their lessons, but we are not in the remedial class. We are not the sort of people who believe the things that are said in the New York Times. But let's go back to it. I had no involvement whatsoever in the flying of the flag, Justice Alito said in an emailed statement to the Times. It was briefly placed by Mrs. Alito in response to a neighbor's use of objectionable and personally insulting language on yard signs. Judicial experts said in interviews that the flag was a clear violation of ethics rules, which seek to avoid even the appearance of bias and could sow doubt about Justice Alito's impartiality in the cases related to the election and the Capitol riot. So a neighbor posted objectionable and personally insulting yard signs, and Justice Alito's wife raised the flag, but upside down. An upside-down flag is a symbol that the nation is under duress. That is what it symbolizes. But let's allow the New York Times to do our thinking for us. The mere impression of political opinion can be a problem, the ethics experts said. It might be his spouse or someone else living in his home, but he shouldn't have it in his yard as his message to the world, said Amanda Frost, a law professor at the University of Virginia. Well, Amanda Frost gets to decide for us. Thank goodness we can trust the experts. This is, quote, the equivalent of putting a stop the steal sign in your yard, which is a problem if you're deciding election-related cases, end quote, she said. Now let's read that headline once again. At Justice Alito's house, a stop the steal symbol on display. But it seems like the only thing they're saying was on display was a flag upside down. Now that's not a stop the steal symbol, except according to a legal ethics expert law professor at the University of Virginia, who the New York Times just happened to call. Did the writer of this article know Amanda Frost and give Amanda Frost a call and say, hey, would you say that an upside-down flag on Justice Alito's house in January 2021 was a stop the steal symbol? And Amanda Frost, of course, says, oh, yes, that's got to be what that is. And what election cases are they worried about him deciding? The strategy is kind of funny. They will always say who appointed a given judge, making it overtly political. Anytime they don't like a decision, they call into question the judge's integrity. It's impossible for a justice appointed by Donald Trump to be objective and do his or her job. But they can't oversell that. They can't overly commit to that because then their justices would be equally as illegitimate. So instead, they try to figure out different ways to use elements from their personal life to suggest that they would then make decisions based on political motivations rather than doing their jobs objectively. You see, Clarence Thomas, he's friends with a rich Republican donor named Harlan Crow, and he's gone on vacation with him before, which means Clarence Thomas probably does the bidding of his friend. And Justice Alito, well, his wife once hung a flag upside down outside of their house because they were being harassed by their neighbors, so now he can't make objective decisions. Interviews show that the justice's wife, Martha Ann Alito, had been in a dispute with another family on the block over an anti-Trump sign on their lawn. But given the timing and the starkness of the symbol, neighbors interpreted the inverted flag as a political statement by the couple. So it's just neighbors interpreted, and this is from nearly 3.5 years ago. The long-standing ethics codes for the lower courts, as well as the recent one adopted by the Supreme Court, stresses the need for judges to remain independent and avoid political statements or opinions on matters that could come before them. You always want to be proactive about the appearance of impartiality. Jeremy Fogel, a former federal judge and the director of the Berkeley Judicial Institute, said in an interview, "The best practice would be to make sure that nothing like that is in front of your house." Oh, gosh. He makes a damning case. Yeah, it's better not to do that. Powerful stuff. We had better remove a Supreme Court justice from the bench. The court has also repeatedly warned its employees against public displays of partisan views, according to guidelines circulated to the staff and reviewed by the Times. Displaying signs or bumper stickers is not permitted, according to the court's internal rule book and a 2022 memo reiterating the ban on political activity. Asked if these rules also apply to justices, the court declined to respond. The exact duration that the flag flew outside the Alito residence is unclear. In an email from January 18th, 2021, reviewed by the Times, a neighbor wrote to a relative that the flag had been upside down for several days at that point. Damn, I wonder if someone in that neighborhood in Alexandria, Virginia, emailed a relative at the New York Times or someone else in politics in an attempt to make Justice Alito look bad. Now, of course, I don't think he does look bad. Our elections were obviously rigged and stolen, and then they staged a Reichstag fire so that the electoral count couldn't be properly objected to. And then they basically canceled all their normal procedures and pushed the certification through. Understanding that the country was under duress at that point is something that should have been obvious to just about anyone. In fact, if there were any patriotic people anywhere in the country who actually believed that Donald Trump attempted to overthrow the government on January 6th, they should have been flying their flags upside down. But of course, everyone who pretended to believe that hoax or actually believed it had already taken a knee in surrender of the country a year earlier, after we are told a man named George Floyd died of a fentanyl overdose while being restrained by a policeman's knee. But let's go back to the New York Times. In recent years, the quiet sanctuary of his street, with residents who are Republicans and Democrats, had tensed with conflict, neighbors said. Around the 2020 election, a family on the block displayed an anti-Trump sign with an expletive. It apparently offended Mrs. Alito and led to an escalating crash between her and the family, according to interviews. I wonder what made the country so tense. Some residents have also bridled at the noise and intrusion brought by protesters who started showing up outside the Alito residence in 2022 after the Supreme Court overturned the federal right to abortion. There was never a federal right to abortion. And again, it is people with the political persuasion of those neighbors who were providing cover for the mayhem in our streets. They are unhappy to see it in their neighborhood. That is the only problem here. Other neighbors have joined the demonstrators whose intent was to, quote, bring the protest to their personal lives because the decisions affect our personal lives, end quote, said Heather Ann Irons, who came to the street to protest. The half dozen neighbors who saw the flag or knew of it requested anonymity because they did not want to add to the contentiousness on the block and feared reprisal. Last Saturday, May 11th, protesters returned to the street waving flags of their own. "Don't tread on my uterus," and using a megaphone to broadcast expletives at Justice Alito, who was in Ohio giving a commencement address. Mrs. Alito appeared in a window complaining to the Supreme Court security detail outside. Now, the New York Times is providing a whole lot of cover here for people doing something illegal. They are legitimizing what these protesters are doing. They are also exposing the fact that this is a coordinated takedown effort on Justice Alito. They are intentionally trying to delegitimize him. Why were abortion protesters going to Supreme Court justices' houses last week? That decision was from 2 years ago, and they're doing it when he's not even home. They are trying to intimidate his family. And of course, we had the story of the attempted assassination on Justice Kavanaugh in his home a couple years back. Turning the flag upside down is a symbol of emergency and distress, first used as a military SOS, historians said in interviews. In recent decades, it has increasingly been used as a political protest symbol, a controversial one because the flag code and military tradition require the paramount symbol of the United States to be treated with respect. Again, these are the people who protect and provide cover for flag burners during the Summer of Love. Over the years, upside-down flags have been displayed by both the right and the left as an outcry over a range of issues, including the Vietnam War, gun violence, and the Supreme Court's overturning of the constitutional right to abortion, and, in particular, election results. So it's justifiable in that case because this very Supreme Court overturned the constitutional right to abortion. That is just nonsensical and dishonest. This is their messaging. It has no contact whatsoever with reality. And no, you cannot say, in particular, election results after spending the prior year in 2020 supporting violent domestic terrorism and communism. In 2012, Tea Party followers inverted flags at their homes to signal disgust at the re-election of President Barack Obama. 4 years later, some liberals advised doing the same after Mr. Trump was elected. You see that? They only advised doing it. They didn't actually do it, except, of course, they did actually do it. Here is what the New York Times linked to, by the way, a Daily Kos article from January 19th, 2017, Time to turn our beloved flag upside down. And then they make the case that Donald Trump lost the popular vote and therefore was illegitimate. Like Donald Trump won according to the rules, but not the rules they would have preferred. So therefore, turn those flags upside down. Now, Joe Biden was named the winner of the election by the media. There's no proof anywhere he received 81 million real lawful American votes. The elections were held unlawfully in countless ways and were wholly uncertifiable at every point along the way. And underneath all of this is the fact that the Alitos did not hang that flag as some sort of pro-Trump, anti-election results statement. The neighbors don't even claim that. They talk about the contentiousness on the block. It seems like everyone understands that it was that Trump sign down the street that was being responded to. Then, of course, the article has big, pretty pictures of all the devastation at the Capitol during the very violent insurrection, just to remind you to be scared, be so scared. During Mr. Trump's quest to win and then subvert the 2020 election, the gesture took off as never before, becoming, quote, really established as a symbol of the Stop the Steal campaign, end quote, according to Alex Newhouse, a researcher at the University of Colorado Boulder. Now, I was paying as much attention to things that were happening then as I am now. I'm better at it now than I was then. I'm a lot more efficient, but I was still paying attention to this stuff all day and all night, every day and every night. I was still in Hollywood, still locked down, basically just in my apartment all the time. And I don't remember ever seeing upside down flags as some part of the Stop the Steal campaign. And for what it's worth, most of us weren't part of any Stop the Steal campaign. We were just saying, hey, that election was obviously stolen. They need an expert to come in and say, oh, yeah, that was definitely one of their symbols. So if Alito was doing it, then that's why. And again, worth repeating, it doesn't matter. Even if that was why, all good. Back to the article as we come toward the end here. A flood of social media posts exhorted Trump supporters to flip over their flags or purchase new ones to display upside down. The New York Times linked source on that claim that there was a flood of social media posts. A Twitter post from January 21st, 2021, after the fake president had already gone through the fake inauguration with a message about the country being in distress from a random American. And then a link to the 4chan boards. This is the proof. 2 professors, 1 random person on Twitter, and then the 4chan boards that have always been absolutely lousy with feds doing their Fed posting thing. If January 6th rolls around and Biden is confirmed by the Electoral College, our nation is in distress. A poster wrote on patriots.win, a forum for Trump supporters, garnering over 1,000 upvotes. Updoots, as they are sometimes called. If you cannot go to the D.C. rally, then you must do your duty and show your support for our president by flying the flag upside down. Oh, wow, a post with 1,000 upvotes. So powerful. Taylor Lorenz can do one of her look at me crying videos and get more attention than that. Taylor Swift can turn her head and get more attention than that. Local newspapers from Lexington, Kentucky to Sun City, Arizona to North Jersey wrote about the flags cropping up nearby. A few days before the inauguration, a Senate candidate in Minnesota flew an upside-down flag on his campaign vehicle. All right, so I guess what? You got a couple hundred people? Okay. Hanging an inverted flag outside a home was an explicit signifier that you are part of this community that believes America has been taken and needs to be taken back, Mr. Newhouse said. This is the college professor from Boulder, Colorado. Okay, commie, sure thing. You are in touch with the zeitgeist. This spring, the justices are already laboring under suspicion by many Americans that whatever decisions they make about January 6th cases will be partisan. Justice Clarence Thomas has declined to recuse himself despite the direct involvement of his wife, Virginia Thomas, in efforts to overturn the election, according to the New York Times. Good for her. That was her patriotic duty. And in the future, the fact that people didn't stand up and make that effort will be a source of shame for them. Now, with decisions in the January 6th cases expected in just a few weeks, a similar debate may unfurl about Justice Alito, the ethics expert said. It really is a question of appearances and the potential impact on public confidence in the court, Mr. Fogel said. I think it would be better for the court if he weren't involved in cases arising from the 2020 election. But I'm pretty certain that he will see that differently. Yes, of course he will, because you are an idiot, Mr. Fogel. If Justice Alito were on another court, Mr. Fogel said, the flag could also trigger some sort of review to determine if there was any misconduct. But because the Supreme Court serves as the arbiter of its own behavior, you don't really have anywhere to take it, he said. It should be noted that that is a product of this regime, the uniparty regime's progress toward making the Supreme Court the ultimate deciding authority, removing the checks and balances. These are the same people trying to make the Supreme Court more powerful. And of course, that's what they're trying to do now. They are trying to take away 2 of the justices from the other side so that decisions might go their way. Now, I'm not sure what that says about Chief Justice Roberts, but it can't be good, because you have to assume that he's the guy that would side with the communists, making it 4-3 without Thomas and Alito. And so we're told that these coordinated takedown efforts, these coordinated delegitimization efforts are about Trump seeking immunity. But are they really? I would suggest in this case they probably are not. The court has a whole bunch of important decisions this year, none more important than Chevron deference, because at that point, they're going to take away the power of the unelected administrative state within the federal bureaucracy to make all the rules by which we have to live by and do business by. The court is essentially prepared with a wave of its hand to eliminate the power of the administrative state, the necessary power to implement the global agenda here in the United States, the same way they did when they overturned the poorly decided Roe v. Wade that communists pretend created a constitutional right for abortion when it did absolutely no such thing. Now, I'm sure the regime would love for the Supreme Court to decide that Donald Trump is immune from being tried by the improperly assigned special counsel Jack Smith, because that would allow the general public to think that Donald Trump was actually guilty of all the nonsense laid out in those indictments. It leaves Trump no opportunity to show the facts from January 6th, the facts from the stolen election. It's probably their best case scenario since they won't get to have the trials prior to the election. And it would also serve to further delegitimize the courts in the event that they will have to make decisions on election-related issues following the 2024 election. And of course, all of this has the added benefit of giving support to the argument from the uniparty that the Supreme Court must be expanded so that someone like Joe Biden can just add 2 more justices if these 2 won't go away. Or why not add 4 more justices and make sure that the communists never lose another case again? These are the very people who told us we were tearing down our institutions. Donald Trump was a threat to the institutions. MAGA extremists are a threat to our institutions and to our very democracy. And here we see them threatening the institutions. And so let's get to the third ridiculous topic of the day. Also, of course, about threatening our institutions. This threat to our fourth estate, to our media, our most important institution, according to the media. And we are going to go through an article by Mr. Potato Head himself, Brian Stelter. It is part of a series from the communist propaganda outlet, The New Republic, called What American Fascism Would Look Like. It can happen here, and if it does, here is what might become of the country. And so their editor, Michael Tomasky, wrote a little introduction to let everyone know about the purpose of the series. And I want to just go through that really quickly because I want you to understand the level of Trump derangement here. No, some admonish, don't get carried away. Sure, Donald Trump is dangerous, perhaps uniquely so, but fascist? The need to label him a fascist says more about the labeler than about Trump. This argument has sprung from certain quarters of the right, which was to be expected, but it has also sprouted from the left, where a point of view has arisen that the hysterical invocation of the F word is as much a danger as Trump. We have trouble seeing the hysteria. We chose the cover image, and it is Donald Trump's face with a Hitler mustache, based on a well-known 1932 Hitler campaign poster for a precise reason, that anyone transported back to 1932 Germany could very, very easily have explained away Herr Hitler's excesses and been persuaded that his critics were going overboard. After all, he spent 1932 campaigning, negotiating, doing interviews, being a mostly normal politician. But he and his people vowed all along that they would use the tools of democracy to destroy it. And it was only after he was given power that Germany saw his movement's full face. Today, we at the New Republic think we can spend this election year in one of 2 ways. We can spend it debating whether Trump meets the 9 or 17 points that define fascism, or we can spend it saying, he's damn close enough and we'd better fight. Man, I think that they might be better served by figuring out who funded Hitler and what else was going on and what's become of all those people who expressed and aligned with the Nazi ideology back then. Are any of them still around, their ideological descendants or their bloodline descendants? Were they transported around the world where they could embed themselves in other countries and other institutions and try to take the whole project worldwide? Were their corporate collaborators shut down, or do they still do business around the world? In fact, are some of them partner organizations of the World Economic Forum? Yeah, all that is true. Why doesn't the New Republic take any of that into account? Or why don't they bother trying to figure out what fascism is rather than just saying it over and over and over again as if everyone agrees on their definition of bad person, probably racist, really powerful, not our democracy. That's their definition. Fascism is the joining of government and corporation to eventually amass and acquire all the power and all the wealth so they can ultimately control every aspect of life. It is quite literally an outgrowth of Marxism. Donald Trump is doing no such thing. But let's close this out. We unreservedly choose the latter course, and so we have assembled herein some of our leading intellectual historians of fascism. A member of the Fourth Estate who learned firsthand what the Trump lash feels like. That's Brian Stelter he's talking about. Leading intellectual historians of fascism. He's talking about Brian Stelter. A leading expert on civil-military relations. This is Zionist conspiracy theorist and warmonger Ruth Ben-Ghiat, who pretends to be an expert on fascism. I actually had a conversation with her about this one day on Twitter. It didn't go well for her, and then I found myself blocked. A great Guatemalan American novelist with a deep understanding of immigrants' lives. Wait a second. I thought that they were supposed to be leading intellectual historians of fascism. All right. One of our most incisive cultural critics and a man with all too real experience in living under a notorious authoritarian regime. The scenarios they describe are certainly grim. We dare you to say, after reading these pieces, that they are impossible. So they are intending to present a hypothetical vision of America under Donald Trump's next term, which would be America under fascism. And remember, the entire narrative purpose of all of this is to paint Donald Trump as Hitler so that MAGA can be painted as Nazis, and then that would eventually justify the state use of violence against the American people, either coming from within America or from the quote-unquote international community. They're trying to get all those little commie child brains worked up into a lather. Nothing else has worked. Might as well try calling everyone Nazis again. But before we get started with Brian Stelter, one of the people who wrote for this series is Rosa Brooks, the Georgetown professor who was responsible for initiating the Transition Integrity Project. That was the regime plan about how to steal the election and how to respond after. That was the main subject of Molly Ball's article in February of 2021 about the cabal effort, the conspiracy to fortify America's elections. She was an architect of the effort post-Steele who supports the global regime, and she is speculating about the dangers of fascism. Maybe I will cover her article at some point. Probably not, but maybe if you want to check it out, go to newrepublic.com. You will find it right in the front page with the big picture of Trump as Hitler. So this is Brian Stelter. Revenge and Freedom from Fact on the media in a fascist America. The crackdown could begin with a security breach at the northwest gate of the White House. Okay, sure. What is that supposed to mean? Imagine on the day of Donald Trump's inauguration, a raucous protest by left-wing groups on the streets north of Lafayette Park. The blocks surrounding the White House are cordoned off with layer after layer of fencing due to the unrest in major cities following Trump's re-election. But a few dozen very motivated activists barrel through the park, all the way across the inauguration parade route along the park's southern edge and inside the White House perimeter. Now, wait a second. Why is there unrest in all the major cities after Trump's re-election? Oh, it's because Rosa Brooks is writing the other article and she's intending to do another transition integrity project. Or they could just use the plan from last time. Weapons are drawn, emergency plans are activated, and Trump is rushed to a deep underground bunker. Order is restored within minutes, but not before the break-in is shown live around the world, since all the major networks have live camera positions on the North Lawn. Oh, that's the perfect place for it then. Thank you, Brian Stelter. Online sleuths notice that a few of the protesters appear to be wearing press credentials. They're fakes, it turns out. And in one stray live shot that gets clipped and decontextualized and shared across all pro-MAGA social media, a CBS correspondent gives a water bottle to a man screaming in agony after being pepper sprayed. That's all it takes for a narrative to take root on the right. The media is complicit. They're in on it. They are trying to assassinate our president. This sounds a lot like how the media spun the January 6th story. Trump feels humiliated and attacked on what is supposed to be his most triumphant day. He and his aides want what he famously promised, retribution. Knowing that the Northwest Gate is a key access point for journalists, a White House aide starts a rumor that the assailants were aided by CNN and CBS News crews. Oh man, that's like when Jade Sacker, who was involved with CNN and making a documentary, brought Antifa member John Sullivan, otherwise known as Jaden X, into the Capitol with her during the very violent insurrection. Or it's also kind of like when the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, brought her daughter and a documentary crew inside the Capitol during the very violent insurrection. Isn't that strange that Nancy and her daughter knew that they should be filming a documentary that day? Gosh, I wonder what they thought was going to happen. Back to Brian Stelter fantasizing. Trump, who is glued to the live coverage, grunts to his chief of staff, "Get them off my lawn." Members of his inner circle, so fed up with years of accountability journalism and so deluded into thinking that Trump's way is the only way, see a chance to go further and squeeze independent media off the airwaves. Get out, they say. Get out of our way. Isn't it weird that Brian Stelter in this scenario understands that Donald Trump has won and been inaugurated, and he still acts as though he has some majority of the American people on his side? No one is on your side, Brian. And what is accountability journalism? You decide guilt and innocence, and then you spend years making the case that who you decided was guilty is guilty? Is that what accountability journalism is, Brian Stelter? I guess the pretense of objectivity is completely gone. And by the way, I'm a fan of that. I don't pretend objective media exists. I'm not objective, neither is anyone else. It is the pretense of objectivity that is the problem. That was always a myth meant to indoctrinate us into the cult of expertise and the cult of media, that for some reason we believe any of these people are attempting to tell us the truth for our benefit. I'm not saying there are none, but these people might be even worse than the scientists. The security breach becomes a pretext for a project that's been on the minds of MAGA leaders for years. After all, Steve Bannon's 2018 promise to flood the zone with shit was just the beginning. Trump's enemy of the people proclamation gave permission to his fans to go further, to delegitimize and dehumanize journalists and make quote unquote alternative facts the only facts. For the coup plotters of 2020, one lesson of Trump's loss was that Trump needed to exert more control over the media in order to prevail. He needed to own the media, ergo Truth Social, which emerged in the aftermath of January 6th. The far right's memory holding of the attack, minimization of the violence, and rebranding of rioters as hostages were successful tests of MAGA's media reality rewriting capabilities. The fact that anyone would go along with Brian Stelter's fantasies attest to the fact of just how retarded these communists are. And no, efforts like Truth Social are not to control the media. They are simply to provide free speech to the American people who do not suffer under communist retardation. Trump's violent rhetoric emboldened his devotees. During the Biden years, pro-Trump trolls daydreamed that once back in power, they would imprison journalists and crush opponents, and they were welcome to say so on Elon Musk's X. That's because it's free speech, Brian. People believe you to be a criminal. And insofar as they are right, you should be imprisoned. We can let the justice system sort that out. No one's trying to kidnap you and put you in a cage. We're not the FBI. As an ex-CNN anchor, I saw it in my mentions when MAGA diehards fantasized about having me locked up at Guantanamo Bay. Gitmo is in your future. You filthy Nazi traitor Democrats belong in Gitmo. All of you deserve to be jailed. Kudos to those people. They are exactly right about Brian Stelter. But again, hey, Brian, that's free speech on social media. You are saying those things about them on television to at least tens of people. It would have been millions years ago, but you're Brian Stelter and you're lying to everybody. Therefore, no one listens to you anymore. Anonymous threats were accompanied by brash promises by Trump loyalists. We will go out and find the conspirators, not just in government, but in the media. Former Defense Department official Kash Patel told Bannon in 2023, "We're going to come after you," Patel proclaimed, "whether it's criminally or civilly." Bannon, overjoyed, said, "We're absolutely dead serious. And yes, Brian, we are. You are communist propagandists doing your damnedest to aid in the insurrection and usurpation of this country by global powers. The lies promoted by you and your peers helped to devastate this society. If you did not commit a crime, you have absolutely nothing to worry about. But otherwise, you knew what the penalty for treason was going in, and you did it anyway." Imagine that the new administration uses the Northwest Gate incursion as a pretext to impose severe restrictions. Most reporters are banned from entering the White House grounds per new Secret Service rules that cite threats to a president's life. As Truth Social fills up with memes equating journalists with terrorists, networks are given 24 hours to remove their equipment. Aides claim that reporters will be able to ask questions via Zoom at virtual press conferences, but Trump refused to hold daily briefings during his first term in office, and the Zoom sessions never materialize. And again, that is a total inversion within the false reality. Donald Trump was in the press room every day during COVID, allowing these cretins to ask him questions, which he would then answer as they interrupted him and attempted to frame him as a liar. Joe Biden is nowhere to be found. No one is under any illusions about Joe Biden with the media. This is ridiculous to even attempt. The reporters who ask questions of Joe Biden have their questions approved in advance, and Joe Biden has papers in front of him indicating who he should call on for their question that he already knows, so that he can then read the prepared answer. He has little cards that tell him where to stand. Gosh, man, Brian Stelter, how are you this bad at your job? Okay, back to his ridiculous fantasy. Media outlets file First Amendment lawsuits seeking a return to pre-Trump II norms. But the government's claims about security threats take precedence and the bans remain in place. Again, these people had the Capitol surrounded for months by the military. Press corps norms like traveling with the president melt away. Trump begins to take trips without any notice to the public at all. Several reporters who resort to staking out Andrews Air Force Base and watching for Air Force One takeoffs are arrested for trespassing. All of this is preposterous. Fox and Newsmax are allowed on the White House grounds, so officials can claim that the real news is still represented. They're not the real news either, Brian. We all know that. We don't care about what Fox News and Newsmax say. Fox says it will provide the other networks with live video of all presidential events and remarks, while workers revert the former press briefing room into the indoor pool it was decades ago. Trump rewards Fox with interviews and promotions, at one point doubling the Murdoch family's market cap in a matter of weeks. And even the hosts who are most tempted to dissent are kept in check by the sudden windfall. Trump and Fox are not friends. Fox is no friend of MAGA. Fox settled the Dominion lawsuit so that no one would take notice of the fact that Dominion knows its machines cannot produce verifiable results that reflect the will and intent of the voter. But we are told that Fox and Trump are all of a sudden best friends, and everyone gets so rich that they won't tell the truth about Trump. And they know that. For the MAGA faithful, Newsmax is always one remote click away. They learned that the hard way in 2020. So they toe the line, this being Fox, by the way. Touting specious rumors about enemies within, about writers feeding resistance tips to foreign governments, about liberal editors doctoring photos of Trump to make him look even older than he really is, about treasonous reporters aiding the protesters on Inauguration Day. Remember when they tried to kill Trump? Becomes a rallying cry on the right, even though it didn't happen. This is honestly incredible projection. Fact checks about what did happen only emboldened Trump's fans to fight harder for punishment of the imagined co-conspirators. CBS says the doxing of its phone and computer networks becomes so intense that the newsrooms can barely function for hours at a time. One night, the evening newscast starts 10 minutes late due to server glitches. A Trump spokesman is quoted calling this a good start, meaning the country would be better off with no evening newscast at all. 2 days later, in a swatting incident, a caller to 911 claims there is a violent intruder inside the home of a top CBS anchor. Police arrive en masse, and amid the chaos, an officer accidentally shoots the anchor's wife, seriously injuring her. The same MAGA heads on social media downplay the violence by digging up the victim's past tweets praising Hillary Clinton. Some even parrot the Trump spokesman and call the injury a good start. This is entirely made up. This is pre-scapegoating. These anti-fascists doth protest too much. He is making up a horrific dystopian story and claiming that it will happen after Trump is reelected. This entire thing is threatening our institutions and threatening our democracy. Of course, it only works in one direction. If we've learned anything, it's that. Inspired by Trump's words in the bunker on Inauguration Day, "Get out" becomes shorthand for a groundswell of anti-media sentiment, mirroring the Trump administration's militarized mass deportations of migrants. If you journalists don't love our America, they say, get out. At the federal level, Trump appointees pull the levers of government to implement the president's wishes. IRS agents commence audits of top newsroom editors. Don't worry, guys, that's not going to happen. There will not be IRS agents. Don't be stupid. The editors find it's almost impossible to prove the audits are retaliatory. Darn. So they will claim injustice and government persecution, and their claims will be met with silence and ridicule? Oh, no. DOJ considers Espionage Act charges against adversarial reporters. Well, did they commit espionage, Brian? Who brought the Espionage Act back into focus? FCC commissioners open probes into the conduct of broadcast station owners who don't follow the Trump line. Republican lawmakers, themselves intimidated by the voters who are calling reporters terrorists, prepare a media accreditation law that would reward media outlets that maintain close ties to the government. Nah, Brian, that's not going to fly with us either. So, sorry, man, you're just making it up. That's not going to happen. Third-party groups flood the courts with libel lawsuits against news outlets. Judges will eventually throw out most of the suits, but each case costs time and money to fight, and the twofold intent is to make the newsrooms bleed out financially and to frighten others from pursuing the same types of stories. Oh, lawfare, as your side has always practiced it. But again, no, I don't think that's going to happen. Remove the censorship, and there will not be a news media industry anymore, because all of them will lose in a free and open market to us and to normal people just sharing information. If you want to start a news outlet, provide true information that helps people make decisions in their lives. And if you can't do that, the market will kill you. It's not Trump supporters or a fascist government. It's that the work you do is worthless. And perhaps even more important than that, it's destructive. The actions at the state and local level are even more disturbing. Newsrooms in Trump's strongholds notice a sharp uptick in threats and harassment. Outside a pro-Trump rally in Florida, a local TV reporter is badly beaten by a group of men wearing MAGA merch, and the police response is so sluggish that observers assume they let it happen. Near a migrant detention facility in Texas, a freelance reporter is struck and killed by a security officer in an immigration and customs enforcement vehicle. Was it an accident or an attack? No one knows for sure. Trump responds to the two incidents by saying the reporters should have told the truth. And so a new test is born. Just tell the truth. Some news agencies, either to appeal to pro-Trump subscribers or to fend off the goons who beat up reporters with impunity, put the word truth in their homepage banners and marketing materials. News Nation rebrands as Just the Truth. Breitbart claims to be the only truth. News Nation, by the way, is the outlet that hosts Chris Cuomo's show. No one is going to listen to News Nation. I would be surprised that in a free speech scenario, Breitbart is even relevant. Breitbart is news for uniparty right normies who want to feel like they're edgy about certain issues. No offense to Andrew Breitbart, no offense to Steve Bannon. I think they're both fantastic. But neither of them are at Breitbart anymore, and Breitbart is normie news. They pretend Joe Biden is a legitimate president just like the rest of these normie news outlets. This happens at the same time that Target stores install extra-large American flags while hiding Black History Month merchandise, and Disney theme parks promote American Pride Days while curtailing gay pride events, and Meta's apps add a free speech tab, while algorithmically de-emphasizing anti-Trump protest content that has been deemed a national security threat. So basically, they are concerned that all of their enforced manipulations are removed. What did they used to say about privilege? Something about how when it's taken away, you feel like you're the one being robbed, but it's really just evening things out. It's weird that Brian Stelter doesn't understand that concept. Some CEOs don't fall in line, but many do, including the heads of several major media outlets. Safety is the rationale. The country is changing, they say. We need to protect you. Some journalists feel compelled to move out of their homes. Others adopt pen names and write anonymously. Oh, you mean like people like me? Oh, I get it, Brian Stelter. Yeah, that is the result of a horribly fascist society. It is the horribly fascist society that you promoted and you profited from, but yeah, you're describing it accurately. Still others scramble to find new lines of work. Television shows critical of Trump are canceled. And by the way, that will 100% happen because those shows, that anti-Trump content, is supported by the constant flow of regime money dedicated to that kind of propaganda. Once that goes away, that kind of propaganda goes away. There is no actual market for that anti-Trump content. It is just part of the media illusion. It always has been. It's supported by mass promotion, explicit and controversial content that is salacious and draws eyes, and it's funded to promote the various equity agendas, the gay agenda, the DEI stuff. Their ratings are never shared. Creators are made fantastically wealthy. Massive production budgets make everything look incredible while the content itself is just soul-destroying. That sort of thing can only happen in a fascist state. Propaganda like that requires the fascism, which means it is proof of the fascism because the propaganda exists. The corporate interests, the global regime, and the state all work together to produce that content. People don't like it, they don't watch it, but then they all give each other awards for having made it, even though no one watches it and no one likes it. And its popularity collapses by the day. But let's continue. Risky assignments are nixed. Dissidents speak out on their own blogs and live streams, but they struggle to reach a mass audience. Oh yeah, that's not what's happening right now. Again, to people like me. I'm a dissident. I speak out on my own blogs and live streams, and I struggle to reach a mass audience because I am banned off all the mainstream platforms. Except for, I suppose, X, formerly Twitter, where I am shadow banned out of the conversation and under constant harassment from bot swarms. And by the way, barred from providing subscription options like the ones available to all the normies that website promotes. The Committee to Protect Journalists points out that Google search results consistently rank far-right smears of independent journalists above the journalists' actual work. Each day brings a new episode of violence or surveillance. Amazing. It's amazing. It's just projection. It's amazing. Outcry over the retaliatory actions is shouted down with the fake news smears that were popularized when Trump took office the first time. Either it's not really happening, or if it is, it's justified. That's the message on Fox. Many Americans feel that they've heard it all before, and they are just plain exhausted. They don't want to have to care anymore. Trump promises they don't have to. Trust me, he says, and don't worry about the news or fight about politics with neighbors. Unity is what he purports to offer, and many take the deal. That was what Biden purported to offer. Trump's offering retribution. You just said it. That's not unity. The unity will come when everybody realizes the retribution is completely and totally justified. United in ignorance, they mindlessly scroll TikTok and Instagram as First Amendment rights are curtailed. They knew who they were voting for, right? Oh, yeah, Brian. What a well-made point. You really nailed us there. Hey, Brian. What would be on TikTok and Instagram if they weren't censored? It would be pro-Trump content, pointing out all the problems with the media, all the hypocrisy, all the overreach, the breakout of fascism under the fake president who was never elected and promises nonetheless to bring unity. Did that work? No. The only reason you all have it so good right now is because of social media censorship, which is why you always pretend there isn't social media censorship. 2 days after Trump's first and so far only inauguration in January 2017, I was privately berated by White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer for questioning his crowd size lies. A couple of hours later, while hosting CNN's Reliable Sources, I asked the following questions. Do Trump's allies want to silence skeptics in the media, destroy the press, or maybe support an alternative press that presents an alternative reality that's more favorable? Well, yeah, support the alternative press for sure. We will present a different version of reality. It just happens to be the only legitimate one that is verifiable in Reality Prime. Stelter answers his own question. We now know the answers. We know exactly what they want. Journalists who worked in repressive regimes recognized it in many cases before American journalists did. I'll never forget an interview I conducted on CNN 1 week after Crowd Size Gate with Mahir Zainalov, an analyst and journalist living in Turkey who was smeared, sued, and deported by the Turkish government in 2014 after reporting on a corruption investigation. Whenever I look at what President Trump and his team are doing here in the United States, I'm like, wait a second. I have seen this movie before. It's all familiar to us, Zainalov told me. And I'm not talking about a country like Iran or China, where autocrats are crushing or strangulating the media. I'm talking about Turkey, a country that was somewhat democratic a decade ago, with a somewhat independent media, and is now turning into a state where at least one journalist is being put behind bars since last summer on average every day. Oh, Brian Stelter, we could only be so lucky. And it's good that you are protective of independent journalists. Thank you. That's us, though. You are a state media propaganda mouthpiece working for corporations to project at all times a false reality that creates the world those corporations can best profit in. There will be no threat to independent journalists whatsoever. There will be no threat to anyone who is dutifully working as a journalist. What we're concerned about are people like you who disseminate the narratives of the global regime's intelligence community. He continued, this is the Turk that Stelter spoke to. And if there's anyone who is saying that this cannot happen here in the United States, they are significantly underestimating how leaders, including in democratic countries, can undermine media freedom and with that, democracy. Now, recall that Stelter had this interview in the week after the inauguration in 2017, and this is what he is saying that Trump will do in his next term, even though he didn't do it in the first term, as this guy suggested he would. These people exist in a bizarro world. Hungary is the best example in Europe. Prime Minister Viktor Orban's coalition government has undermined media freedom and created, quote, a climate of fear and intimidation, end quote. Human Rights Watch wrote in a scathing report earlier this year. Independent media outlets have closed or changed ownership and turned pro-government overnight. And as always, you get the regime's anti-Orban pitch at all times. So imagine that in 2024, a popular but financially imperiled media company is offered a carrot and a stick by a Trump confidant. Take the carrot and offload the company's news division, or accept the stick of government regulation that will drive the share price down. Imagine that someone like Musk emerges as an eager buyer. If the board doesn't give in, they're portrayed as siding with the quote-unquote terrorists. What will the directors do? Maybe you think I'm overdoing it, and maybe I am. Well, yeah, you are. You're making absolutely all of this up, at least insofar as it would represent the world brought into being in Trump's next term. It is, however, a picture of what is happening right now under the regime your people installed. Maybe, he says, there will be no precipitating incident, no crackdown, no threat to America's First Amendment tradition. But at a moment when the country desperately needs government oversight to stop generative AI from obliterating the media business and government support to salvage what remains of the local news economy, Trump is offering none of the above. Instead, he is vowing to investigate media outlets that challenge him. His fans have been primed for revenge and for freedom from fact. If the chill descends in 2025, no one can claim to be surprised. And no one will, Brian, claim to be surprised. We will be too busy celebrating. We were told that our democracy and our institutions would be torn asunder by Donald Trump and Trump supporters. And here we have all of them doing it for us. Well, thanks, guys. It's much better this way. I can't wait until George Stephanopoulos and friends let everyone know how devolution works. I'll be back on Monday at the same reasonable time on the same reasonable podcast network. I don't have a network. Masks and lockdowns don't work. They lied to you about a pandemic, and Joe Biden will never be president.
In my mind, that's the end game.
If you're listening to this episode for free, you can support me and support the show and the work I do by signing up for a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can do so for as low as $50 a year or $5 a month. Comes out to under a quarter per episode, and you'll blast right through the paywall for all of the writing. The merch store is www.cancelcouture.com, and you can find everything else by heading to Linktree. Linktree.com/I'mYourModerator. And I'll see you soon out on the range. It's